With Fantasy Premier League launching in the next few days, we have had plenty of price reveals to give us a bit of a taste of what's to come this season. And in this video, I'm going to go through those players like Erling Haaland, Salah and Cole Palmer to discuss whether they're going to be essential in our squads and a few of them, why they might be overpriced. So as always, guys, welcome to the video. Make sure you drop a like and of course, smash that subscribe button ahead of the new season. Enough waffling. Let's get into today's video. So the first price reveal that we had going into the season was Erling Haaland, and he has now become the most expensive player in the history of FPL. Last season, he held the joint record at 14 million alongside some of the greats like Ronaldo, Van Persie and Thierry Henry, but he has now smashed that record, coming in at 15 million. And I, for one, am delighted that FPL have done this. In the last two seasons, we've had no choice but to put Erling Haaland in our teams because of the lack of forwards available in the game. Ollie Watkins obviously emerged as a brilliant option last year, but with Haaland only 14 million, it meant that we were able to afford Haaland and still have brilliant players in our squads. Just that £1 million increase is now going to give managers a slight headache on whether they can go against him or not. Now, of course, we haven't had all of the prices so far, but with Ollie Watkins' price being announced, we will come on to that in a bit, it means that Haaland is quite clearly the premium forward in this game, and it is a big drop-off if we are to go to another forward in the game like an Ollie Watkins. Now, looking at the fixtures coming up, because I think in game week 1 it is so important that we don't know loads about the players, we don't know loads about how the team are going to kick on in the season, so game week 1 is a little bit of a punt for us. So we have to look at the price of a player and importantly the fixtures coming up. And it's a tricky one for Man City to kick things off away against Chelsea. Not ideal, but let's be real. City against any team, we would fancy them to pick up a positive result. But after this, game week 2 against Ipswich at home, which could be an absolute cricket score if Man City hit the ground running, followed by West Ham, Brentford, Arsenal at home and then Newcastle away. So over a 6-game week period, I actually don't think they are favourable fixtures, but it's the game week 2 fixture at home against Ipswich, where I think if you're a manager that is intending to go without Erling Haaland, that is a scary prospect to have in your team. So on the face of it, I think it's a brilliant pricing structure from FPL to put him at 15 million. It, of course, is going to depend on the price of the rest of the players to see if we could accommodate him in our sides. And it's going to be really important to find out what the price of Phil Foden is, because maybe he could be our slight difference against Erling Haaland. But right now, just because of game week 2 and even 3 and 4, I think it's a scary prospect not to have Erling Haaland in our teams at 15 million. But I'm so glad FPL have done this to maybe split the community and decrease that ownership throughout this season. So let me know your thoughts on Haaland. This is the big one right now that is splitting the community. And I'll be super interested to know your thoughts in the comments section. So it was only right from FPL headquarters that once we had Erling Haaland's price, we had to get the next best FPL option in Mo Salah. And he ended up having his price stay the same at 12.5 million. I think we'd all probably say it was quite a disappointing season for Mo Salah for his incredibly high standards, but I would also say it was quite a difficult season for Liverpool in general, with their season tailing off at the end. So I don't think we need to read too much into Mo Salah in terms of his actual ability. The big thing we need to ask ourselves going into this season is, of course, with the departure of Jurgen Klopp and Arne Slot coming in, does this improve Mo Salah or does it decrease him as an FPL option? And unfortunately, going into game week 1, we are going to get a few preseason games, but I don't think we're going to have all of the answers going into that opening game away against Ipswich. What I think is going to be really important is to understand what sort of position Mo Salah is playing. Now, we've seen a little bit from Arne Slot in his days at Feyenoord, and there is a lot of talk about how Mo Salah could potentially be deployed as a split forward or one of the forwards in a front three. So it's exciting times that we might not see Mo Salah pushed out all the way to the width like we did see at times under Jurgen Klopp last season. And I do think at 12.5 million, when we look at the fixtures for Liverpool, it's almost impossible to think not to have Mo Salah in our teams. Ipswich followed by Brentford, United, Forest and Bournemouth at home, and then Wolves away. It really does feel like one of those sort of situations where if you do go without Mo Salah and you bring in an alternative midfielder, you could be risking yourself of playing an early wildcard in your team if we don't see any other midfielders priced close to Mo Salah. Because if you get it wrong and Mo Salah hits the season really early on against Ipswich and Brentford, we could be in a situation here where you need to completely rejig your team to upgrade one of the 10 million midfielders in your squads to get Mo Salah in. And on the base of it right now, as long as we see a positive pre-season and these upcoming fixtures, I don't see a world where we go without Mo Salah in our teams. And I actually prefer him right now to Erling Haaland based on the prices. Now, of course, we did have a few other Liverpool players announced, and a couple of these are really, really interesting. First up, Gakpo remains as a forward in the game, but at 7.5 million is quite interesting. Of course, it's going to completely depend on how Arne Slot deploys his starting 11, who makes the starting 11, because of course, this becomes a redundant option if Darwin Núñez is more of a preference for Slot. And again, Núñez coming in at 7.5 million, it really does feel like a bit of a fight between those two players. It's worth noting, if Liverpool do start to move away from the emphasis of Mo Salah and they do look to actually upgrade the importance of a Gakpo or a Núñez, 7.5 million for maybe a talismanic Liverpool attacker could be FPL gold. So we do need to monitor this, because while I don't think there is a midfielder in the game that can replace Mo Salah, maybe one of the Liverpool forwards could do so if you prefer Erling Haaland in your teams. But again, we need to monitor pre-season. Outside of this, big one, Trent dropping down to 7 million. Looking at the fixtures coming up, if Trent does deploy in a system where he can influence attacking wise, I think this is our premium forward already. I know Vardy at Man City was fantastic last year, but I don't think many people come close to Trent. I do think he is an incredible option at 7 million, but again, we need to see him under Arne Slot. Outside of that, McAllister 6.5 million. Decent value, but again, I think we want to be more tempted by the forwards and Mo Salah, and Van Dijk remaining at 6 million. A good price nonetheless, but I think with the price of Trent, I'd rather just take the punt and spend that million more in the squad. But again, let me know your thoughts on the Liverpool players. I think there's some interesting prices here. Next up, we had some of the Chelsea price reveals, and outside of Haaland, Mo Salah, I would argue Cole Palmer's price was the most interested for FPL managers. And while Haaland has become the most expensive FPL option in history, we've also seen another record broken, with Cole Palmer becoming the highest price increase in one season in the history of the game. He is risen by 5 million, previously being 5.5 million, now 10.5 million, off the back of an astonishing breakthrough season at Chelsea. And I, for one, I'm delighted they have done this once again. I think they've priced this correctly. I think if they put Cole Palmer at 8.5 million, it would have been a no-brainer for FPL managers to put him in their teams. Guaranteed game time, even under a new manager. It would be astonishing if he isn't in that squad on penalties, and we can see what a creative influence he has in this Chelsea team. 10.5 million is a phenomenal price, because in a minute we're going to talk about the other Chelsea player that could be a differential to Cole Palmer. And already, if you try and build a squad with Haaland, Salah and Cole Palmer in, you are spending £38 million of your budget. And that is just not a feasible strategy in today's game, because you are then basically spending 4.5 million on the rest of your players. So one of those three players, Haaland, Salah or Palmer, needs to be sacrificed going into game week 1. And I think maybe Cole Palmer is the one, but we will come on to that in a minute. Outside of this, Jackson coming at 7.5 again. He had a great season last year, even though a lot of people had a go at him. I think that's a good price. Sterling, we need to see if he comes into Maresca's side, but there is an argument with him playing wide wingers. Dewsbury Hall, again, could be phenomenal at 6 million, but with the competition in that Chelsea midfield, I think that's too risky. And James, this is the big one. Now, we need to remember, he is suspended for the opening 3 games because he stupidly got a red card in the final game, so he won't be available, but it's going to be a great opportunity for us to understand how the Chelsea team are going to defend and also be influential in the final third. And if we see James come into the team for game week 4 or game week 5, we will be there at 5 million. But when we take a look at the fixtures for Chelsea, obviously game week 1 is not ideal at all. But after that, Wolves, Palace, Bournemouth, West Ham, Brighton. Few away games there, which could be tricky for Chelsea. But if we do see a positive pre-season for Maresca, then I do think the Chelsea options are going to be viable picks. Now, I mentioned about Cole Palmer being at 10.5 million. I think it is the perfect price for him. But it doesn't necessarily mean that he's good FPL value. And the reason being is Nkunku. This is probably one of the most interesting prices I've seen across all of these reveals. 6.5 million. And the big thing about Nkunku is that he's had a positional change, moving from a forward down to a midfielder. So again, we have nothing to judge off from last season. But while he was on the pitch for Chelsea in that limited time, he did actually do quite well from an underlying stats perspective. And now being a midfielder, he gets an additional point for a goal, an additional point for a clean sheet. So again, just enhances him as an FPL option. And again, while his price is phenomenal, I also really like the positional change of Nkunku, because there's definitely a world where he does get deployed as a number 9. Now again, with a new manager in charge, we are coming into the season similar to Liverpool with a lot of uncertainty on what Chelsea are going to look like and what their best 11 is going to look like. But we need to remember, Nkunku is not historically an injury-prone player. He's had a very injury-hit one season. And we need to remember he is also a phenomenal player in general. And I'm expecting a huge season from Nkunku. And if he does start the season under Maresca at 6.5 million, I actually think he's better FPL value and better pick than Cole Palmer, even though he won't necessarily have penalties. So again, lots to monitor in pre-season. But of the 3 premiums we've seen so far, I think Palmer has the best alternative in Christopher Nkunku. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. So after having the price reveal of Erling Haaland at 15 million, I think we all saw obviously the returns of the forwards last year, with Watkins being the highest scorer forward, and think to ourselves, if Haaland's 15 million, what is Ollie Watkins going to be? And I think FPL have made their first mistake here. Ollie Watkins is coming in as a £9 million forward. And I think we could all probably see, still with some price reveals to come, nobody is going to be more expensive than Ollie Watkins in this game. We're waiting for people like Alexander Isak, but I see no world where he is going to be more expensive. So Ollie Watkins coming in at 9 million. There is now a £6 million gap between Watkins and Erling Haaland. And this is a forward that's capable of more than 200 points. We know that he's obviously an incredible goal scorer, but also an assister, 19 goals, 18 assists last year. We know that his minutes are guaranteed. Douglas Luiz has now left the club, so he potentially could be the penalty taker, and the fixtures are incredible. So regardless of whether you're having Erling Haaland or you're not, I think it's almost impossible to ignore Watkins in our teams. We saw last season what he can do without him in your squad. He decimated my rank at times when I swung against him for someone like a Darwin Núñez. And at 9 million, I think this is too cheap. I think FPL should have gave us a bit more of a decision. Bump him up to 10 million, bump him up to 10.5 million, give us a real deliberation whether he could be your number 1 forward in your squads. And it's worth noting, I definitely think there is still an opportunity to do so, because with Haaland being so expensive, if you put Haaland in, you put Watkins, and maybe you put a Palmer or a Mo Salah, that's a lot of your budget already allocated to 3 players. And I do think there could be an argument to maybe say to yourself, go without Erling Haaland, have Watkins as your number 1 forward, and have someone like a Kai Havertz alongside him. Now, while I know Watkins is just an unbelievable option, I think he's almost essential on this price point, but let me know your thoughts in the comments. I do think Havertz is an interesting curveball. Now, we don't have the Bukayo Saka price yet, so we do need to monitor that, because if Bukayo Saka comes in at like 9 million, that's a no-brainer going for Bukayo Saka. But if Saka comes in at 10.5, 11 million, and we think to ourselves, that's just too much money, this could be our Arsenal asset to own. So Kai Havertz last year, playing as a number 9, we know was a decent option in the second half of the season. The big thing, of course, is that Kai Havertz is now a forward in the game, and we know Arsenal are actively looking for a forward during the summer window. So I think if Arsenal recruit someone, then Kai Havertz probably doesn't become an option because of rotation, minutes, don't know where he's going to feature in terms of a positional sense. But if he does play as the number 9 and they don't recruit, I think this is a brilliant option for our teams. Now, the fixtures are very mixed. Great in game week 1, game week 3, but they have Villa away, Tottenham away, Man City away. And I do think maybe avoiding Arsenal attack over that period could be a good differential for some managers out there. But of course, we know Arsenal are one of the best coached teams in the league, and I do think they could score against most teams. So monitor Kai Havertz, but I still think Watkins is much more of a better option at 1 million more. So let me know your thoughts on the comments, but this is a big mistake by FPL. Now, I for one was really interested to see the 2 prices of Gordon and Bruno Fernandes for very different reasons. A phenomenal season for Anthony Gordon, one in which we have seen a price rise from 5.5 million to 7.5 million, which I think is absolutely a fair price for someone like Anthony Gordon. And then Bruno Fernandes, a really disappointing for Man United, and arguably for Bruno Fernandes himself, comes in at 8.5 million as a midfielder. So first up, Anthony Gordon, we have to say, he is a lot at the basis right now of leaving the club for potentially someone like Liverpool. If he stays at Newcastle, I think he remains a brilliant option. If he moves to someone like Liverpool, I think we forget him as an option, because there will be far too much rotation for someone like him at 7.5 million. But if he does remain at Newcastle and he becomes one of their key figures in the team, looking at the fixtures coming up, especially the opening 5 fixtures, Southampton, Bournemouth, Spurs, Wolves, Fulham, That's a great start to the season for someone like Anthony Gordon, who we know at home in particular is a real menace, and he has had fantastic returns last season. Now, if someone like a Bruno Guimaraes leaves Newcastle, that could diminish the attacking returns of Anthony Gordon, because he can be a little bit dependent on the service that he receives from other players in the game. But regardless, I think 7.5 million is an interesting price for Gordon, but I think maybe he could be one of those that we actually ignore this season. And the reason being is because of the structure of squads. We might have to opt for Mo Salah, our second premium, and then come all the way down to maybe a 6.5 like a Christopher Nkunku. And maybe Bruno Fernandes is our next best alternative. Maybe structuring our team as Mo Salah, Bruno Fernandes, and then cheap midfielders is the way to go. Because when I look at him at 1 million more expensive, I'm quite excited by Man United as a team this year. I feel like they've finally got some stability in the club. I think the fixtures are mixed, but still Fulham, Brighton, who we know are quite open, but they do have a new manager, Southampton, Palace, even home games against the big teams, I always fancy Man United to do okay in. And I do think with him being most likely the penalty taker in this team and an influence constantly, I think Bruno Fernandes is actually edging it over someone like an Anthony Gordon. And I do think while a lot of people will be tempted by Gordon because he was the shiny toy last year, I think we're going to forget about what a phenomenal option Bruno Fernandes can be in Man United's team. And I think right now, if I had to choose between the two, I'd actually rather pay 1 million more and go for someone like Bruno Fernandes. So again, let me know your thoughts. Interesting prices for both. Going to completely depend on whether Gordon gets a move. But I think Bruno Fernandes is a real great price. It's 8.5 million. So finally, just to wrap up this video, because I am aware that we are going to get some more price reveals over the next few days, I just want to touch on a couple of other ones that I thought were notable mentions going into this season. We've had plenty of other players, but of course, not all players are FPL picks. So these are the 5 that really caught my eye for different reasons. So first up, Rayan Aït-Nouri of Wolves coming in at 4.5 million. Another player that, of course, is getting some speculation about potentially leaving the club. But if he does remain at Wolves, we saw him pick up some incredible positions last year, whether it be as a wing back, sometimes as part of a front three. Now, not sitting here saying that he is going to play as a forward or even an attacking wing back, but 4.5 million regardless. When we're looking for fullbacks who offer maybe some clean sheet potential, but importantly attacking potential, this is one of those sorts of players. And I think regardless of the fixtures for Wolves, he could be a really shrewd pickup at 4.5 million. So get Aït-Nouri on your watch list. A player similar to Watkins that I think they've really underpriced is going to be someone like a João Pedro. Now, he was at the mercy last season of De Zerbi rotation. It is fair to say, though, European competitions did have a factor on it, and João Pedro was a little bit injury prone last year. But if he does come into the new season as the starting number 9, or at least as a 10, 5.5 million as a forward is a little bit of a game changer for our FPL teams. When we're looking at these premiums like Haaland, Salah, Cole Palmer, we need to find these budget enablers in our squads. And I do think if he has a positive pre-season, again, we don't know about how Brighton are actually going to set up under their new management, but this could be an unbelievable option in our teams if he is a starter. So this could be a bit of a defining player in the game. Kudus. This is the man that I was interested with because he's such a phenomenal player and he has proven that he can actually deliver from an FPL points perspective. Now, we need to see what happens at West Ham, because if Paqueta leaves, I think that diminishes West Ham as a team in general. But if they have good recruitment, Kudus, again, a player that, unlike Gordon, who is a little bit reliant on service, he can create his own magic. We've seen it driving past 3 or 4 players and getting a goal. 6.5 million, I'm really interested in Kudus, and much more so than Jarrod Bowen, who's a million more at 7.5. Last up, a few defensive options. We've been looking for a 4.5 million goalkeeper with Pickford coming in at 5, Bernd Leno at 5, Vicario at 5. Flecken right now is the outstanding 4.5 million goalkeeper. Brentford last season, very injury hit, so I don't really want to judge him as a team last year. And Flecken, a little bit suspect as a goalkeeper, but it was his debut season. I think it could be an outstanding season for someone like a Flecken. While he might not necessarily accumulate clean sheets, I do think he might be good for save points this season and therefore maybe some bonus points. So keep an eye on Flecken. I do think he's a great option. And finally, Pedro Porro coming in at 5.5 million. I would love to have seen him come in at 5 million, but we did see moments last year where he was a phenomenal attacking option, and we knew a haul was going to come at some point last season, and they did at their times at the back end. Pedro Porro is one that's definitely on my radar. Now, with Trent coming in at 7, it might be difficult to have a Trent and a Pedro Porro while affording all these attacking outputs. But maybe if you don't want to go Trent, and there are times in the season where Spurs have favourable fixtures, Pedro Porro is one to keep on your radar. But because of Spurs' opening fixtures, I think he is probably an avoid for game week 1 in particular. But I thought these were some few notable picks just to keep on your radars going into game week 1. Yes, guys, okay, that's going to wrap up the first FPL video of the season. I just thought it would be nice to go through some of the opening price reveals, my initial thoughts. But of course, we're going to have plenty of FPL news over the coming days. Importantly, I think the game will drop either Monday night or Tuesday. So make sure if you're not already, you do become a subscriber to the channel. There is going to be so much content coming over the summer. It'd be awesome to have you on board. And again, a massive thank you for the support during the summer with Euro content. It's been massively appreciated. If you have any questions or any thoughts, get them in the comment section. I'll be really interested in your thoughts in general. Have an amazing day. Come on, England. And I'll see you in the next video. Take care. Cheers.